As we installed this exhibition, we also had great surprises, like the painting behind me by Gracia Pereira Coutinho. I didn't know, to be perfectly honest, I didn't know the work. I looked at the record of the collection and I got quite intrigued by this painting. First, because it's always great that you encounter a name that you don't know. You know, installing the collection is also the perfect strategy to actually learn more and learn about the collection. And actually, I was totally surprised when the painting came, because I was expecting a very different painting. And I discovered a painting that actually was richer than I thought. That was actually, in full dialogue with this pictorial story that I'm trying to unfold in front of you. This notion of how do you push the limit of painting? How do you push the limit of representation? Here, in this painting from the 70s, the 1970s, 1977, you have a tension in this painting, almost a contradictory tension. You have a structure a little bit like the Three Crosses by Joachim Vieira, or the Gerhard Richter, or the Alvaro Lapa painting. You have this underlying structure, geometrical structure. That's what in the museum jargon we would call minimal art. Art, or a visual language, reduced to its minimum expression, systematic expression, almost mathematical expression, a way to think of a painting or making a trace, of making an object that remove from the aesthetic decision actually the notion of decision itself. You have a grid, you don't need to be an expressionist. The grid is just the pure visual extension of a mathematical definition. But in each of the case, the artist had the opposite gesture, which is the uncontrollable gesture of the brush stroke. So you have two movements, and I would say absolutely Cartesian model, Apollonian model, controlled and cold, and then the brushstroke, which is the unconscious part of the work, just the hand, the gesture, the Dionysiac part of the painting. In all the decorative aspect of it, because it's also almost a pointillist painting. It could be a landscape, it could be foliage, it could be a representation. But again, it plays on these two levels. A little bit here, like this beautiful work from almost the same year. We're in 1977 here, 1978 here, with the artist Manuel Casimiro, where two things start to enter the making of the work. Again, a little bit like with Joachim Vieira or with Richard Turtle or Barry Levey, this idea that the material of the work, the material of painting can be different. And again, this equilibrium, this balance between a figure, something we know, an image we know, and just the pure desire to work on the process that define the work. Here you have these pieces of paper assembled together, or like the Barry Levey, about to fall apart. They are still together, but the art might suggest that they are about to collapse. And then you have this material, this paper seems to be pooled in the ink, in the color, and have this kind of, has absorbed, almost like a sponge, the layers of color, this gray brownish color, in such a way that it defines a line on the different piece of the paper, almost like an horizon. And for me, I always see this work as either recomposing itself or about to decompose. As with Lapa and the table, as with Richter, there is a definition of a process, or with Coutinho, the definition of a process, and the process itself is designing the form that we are witnessing. It's almost the same here with this sculpture by the fantastic artist, and we're so lucky to have this work in the collection, Angelo de Souza. A little bit like, actually, there is almost a play in the installation with the work by Manuel Casimiro, which might be about to collapse, this sculpture, which is in this moment just before the sculpture itself is about to fall on the floor. It's just hung, and the last piece here is in this kind of purgatory moment. If I cut the rope, then it's going to collapse like a deck of cards. So even with this fixed image, the artist is suggesting movement in sculpture, a little bit like a Calder sculpture, a mobile sculpture. That this painting, and I don't encourage people to do that, but actually this sculpture is actually a sculpture that suggests movement, like the movement which is frozen here with the work of Barry Levey. And if you look at the painting here of Angelo de Souza, again, you have this moment of unbalance. You have a painting that is actually almost tricking you. First, you think it belongs to the tradition of monochromatic painting, like Yves Klein, like Ad Reinhardt, or going back to the tradition of Malevich, when only one color and the power, the suggestive power of one color create the painting and affect the space and the perception of pure color in a painting. A tradition that there's a long tradition of that, but let's say coming out of either Malevich or Matisse. There is something which is almost a way or a strategy to force you to look harder. Is that the line in the middle is not purely geometrical like you have with Joachim Vieira or with Gerhard Richter. The line that seems to divide the painting in two equal space, like the grid in Gracia Coutinho, is actually does not divide the painting in two equal space, but actually veer to the left. Then the notion of monochrome, what looks like a greenish yellow, one color, is actually the result of layers and layers and layers of painting. So there is almost a palimpsest painting, the notion that the work is just produced by covering and covering and covering, almost as if Angelo de Souza, with this painting, wanted to cover the entire history of painting. So when we're talking about the Gerhard Richter painting, you had this ambiguity of pure abstraction, geometrical abstraction, and a view of a window, a view of architecture. The painting behind me by the Portuguese artist Fernando Lanhas, which is actually fantastic to see in dialogue with Lapa, with Pinheiro, is an artist. He was not only an artist, as you can see on the side, he was also writing poetry, writing his dreams, so the notion of literature, and we'll see that later when we go through the exhibition, that at some point the text, language, literature will be part of the making of not only the exhibition, but the making of the work. Lanhas was not only a painter, he was a known architect, he was interested in astrology, so he was very much a Renaissance man who put his finger on every mode of expression that it could. Knowing that, we're talking again with Joachim Vieira and with Tuttle, with this notion of painting that being matter, being an object. Here you have that, an object which is actually between a painting itself and a piece of architecture, a fragment of architecture, as the frame, the medium of the painting itself is not left to chance. Every decision is part of the work. And the panel that hold the painting in the middle, this triptych, is belong to the work. So a work that almost suggests an architectural presence. It's also a triptych, and the triptych also has a tradition here. We can think of the retable in religious painting, and a little bit like Richter or like Gracia Coutinho, plays with the ambiguity of what is on the painting. When you look at the painting quickly, there is this symmetry. You almost think that it represents something, that it is a body, the color of the flesh with this kind of dirty pink that he's using, but it's not. It's not representation, it's not a body, it's actually pure geometrical abstraction. I think when you look at this room, from the Barry Levey to the Tuttle to the Angelo de Souza, you start to look at of artists who invite us to see painting everywhere, that you're surrounded by shape and form that can inform our understanding of painting. I would be almost tempted to look at the stain on our floor here and look at it as a work of art, where you have, a little bit like the Gracia Coutinho, the uncontrollable shape of the stain. Obviously something happened on the floor, and then this mark on the floor that creates a contradiction on the floor. I would love to be able to tell you that this is a piece of conceptual art that reacts to the story of abstraction and complete this movement of the dematerialization of a painting, but it's not just a stain on the floor.